how it lights my path, how it guides my way.
Reading from 1 Samuel chapter 18, the first 16 verses. Now it came about, when David had finished speaking to Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as himself. Saul took him that day and did not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David with his armour, including his sword and his bow and his belt. David went out wherever Saul sent him and prospered, and Saul set him over the men of war. And it was pleasing in the sight of all the people and also in the sight of Saul's servants. It happened as they were coming, when David returned from killing the Philistine, that the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet Saul with tambourines, with joy, and with musical instruments. The women sang as they played and said, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s." Then Saul became very angry, for this saying displeased him, and he said, "They have ascribed to David 10,000s, but to me they have ascribed only thousands. Now what more can he have but the kingdom?" Saul looked at David with suspicion from that day on. Now it came about on the next day that an evil spirit from God came mightily upon Saul, and he raved in the midst of the house while David was playing the harp with his hand, as usual. And a spear was in Saul's hand, and Saul hurled the spear, for he thought, "I will pin David to the wall." But David escaped from his presence twice. Now Saul was afraid of David, for the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. Therefore Saul removed him from his presence and appointed him as his commander of 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people. David was prospering in all his ways, for the Lord was with him. When Saul saw that he was prospering greatly, he dreaded him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, and he went out and came in before them. I'd just like to invite David up to speak to us. Lord, thank you for David. Thank you for this loyal and faithful servant, Lord, who brings joy to us when we see him worshipping and loving you, Lord, as he's done for many, many years. Thank you for the wisdom you have given him. Thank you for all the years of walking faithfully with you. And I pray now, Lord, that the words you've given him to share with us, Lord, will bring joy and freedom to our hearts too. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Isabel. When I read this passage, I thought, this is a very masculine or male passage, because it's all about three great men, great leaders of men, great authority, and almost the whole story is about one or other of these three. Now, I come from a very male background. At the age of 7, I was sent to boarding school, and at the age of 10, coming up to 11, we emigrated because of Indian independence and nobody knowing what was happening, and we saw a lot of violence up in the north of India, people getting shot, people trying to jump on trains and being ordered off with Sten guns and things like that. My father had died when I was 3. My mother thought we better go home. And home was England. And the first Pharaoh had gone out to India before 1800. So how England was still home, I don't know. But we came when I was 10, coming up to 11, and I then went to a boarding school, again, till I was 18. Not because my family or my mother was wealthy. We got scholarships, my brother and I, and you were means tested. So if you didn't earn very much, you paid very little at this boarding school. So I did another 7 years of being a boarding school. And then I had to do 2 years national service, no women, it was all men. And after the national service of 2 years national service, I went to university. And in those days, the college was all men, no women. It's changed radically now. And after that, I went into an engineering design office for 2 years. And we had, well, yes, we did have women, but they were women who traced the drawings, and they were women who were secretaries, but we had no women engineers whatsoever. If you go into a modern design office, there's probably 50% women, 50%, perhaps slightly less, maybe 40% women, 60% men, but it's very, very different now. But I'm talking about when I went in, it was a totally male society. And then we went on a construction site where you had manual labourers and skilled labourers and no women at all. Now, when I was doing my national service in Canada, we were sharing, I was being trained as a navigator, we were sharing rooms of 4. And there were 3 of us who were 19 in the room, and one had tried to qualify as an accountant before he did his national service. So he was about 23 or 24. We looked upon him as the old man in our group. And he had a lot of skills. People liked to go and talk to him about their problems. And I happened to go into the room once when he was just on his own, and he said to me, David, you've not got a girlfriend, have you? And you've never had one. And I said, no, that's right. And he said to me, David, you're the sort of man, you'll meet a woman, you'll fall in love with her, and you will get married to her, and you'll be very happy. He wasn't a Christian or anything. This wasn't it's just what he said to me. I couldn't believe it. It was 8 years after that day till I met Anne. So, and I never had a girlfriend in all that time. So basically, I've always been quite happy in male society because it was what I was used to. I'm delighted I'm no longer in male society anymore. Now, what you've got in this story is 3 very significant men. Great men, leaders, and you hear that. And the amazing thing to me is that Jonathan and David, it says their souls were knitted together. You know, if you could think it's like one ball of wool and another ball of wool, and they're being knitted in together. And I love the character of Jonathan, actually. Anne and I named our first son, his second name was Jonathan. We were both thought he was such a great man. He made a covenant with David. Here was Jonathan, the rightful next heir to the throne, the oldest son of King Saul. And when King Saul died, it should have been Jonathan who was going to be the next. Saul had 5 sons by his wife, and he had 2 sons by a concubine. But Jonathan was the preeminent one because he was the first son. And that's the way, in our monarchy, that's the way, isn't it? Charles was the first son of Queen Elizabeth, and so he became the monarch. And William is the first son of Charles, and he'll become monarch under normal circumstances. That's the way monarchies work. And Jonathan makes this covenant with, you can see he's going to be the next king, and he's giving it up. And he's saying to David, I realize that you're going to really be the next king. And he gives him, he has the covenant with David that they will be friends for life, or they'll care for each other for life. And he gives him his robe, his armor, his sword, his bow, and the old version said, the old versions of the Bible, I was looking at them this morning, said, and his girdle. And I thought, what's a girdle? And the modern translations say it's his belt. But he would have had, as the future king, a special robe. And you remember in the story of the prodigal son, when he comes back, the first thing he does to acknowledge him as a son is to give him a robe. And the robe would have been a robe signifying Jonathan's royalty, I suppose, is what you're saying, his royalty that he's going to come. And you'll probably, if you go a little bit further back, you'll find that there was a great shortage of swords and armor and things like that, because they weren't, all the blacksmiths had been closed and they weren't allowed to make armors, swords, armor, anything like that. And so he's giving to David his armor and his sword. He's really saying, you need this. You're going to be the leader. Jonathan has tremendous bravery. If you read in 1 chapter 14, and I can remember Faith preaching on this passage, where he goes and he, with his armor bearer, he goes and he says, shall we attack these Philistines? And if we'll say this word, and if they say this, then we'll go and attack them. And he goes up and he attacks. So Jonathan was actually a very brave man. It wasn't that he was giving it up because he didn't like the thought of being king. It was what God was doing in him that enabled him to see through David. And I actually love the character of Jonathan. I think it's such a generous, such a kind character. Somebody was telling me that their wife had to go to, I think this was perhaps a few years ago, had to go to a clinic, not a clinic, a sort of where they prepare for women to have babies. You understand, where they talk over what are the things. And he was saying that at this clinic, all the women were asked what they wanted their children to be. And he said, one said that they wanted their child to become a lawyer, another wanted their child to become a doctor, another wanted their child to become a teacher, another, I forget what, they were all had these. And when it came to his wife said, I want my child to be kind. And I thought, what a different attitude, isn't it? What you're wanting is something in the character, not in the fact of that they're going to have jobs that they're going to earn lots of money. I thought that was a lovely thing of that lady to say. I'm looking for something that is different from what the world wants from people. Next thing to see is David has total obedience. Wherever Saul sends him, he goes. He's not taking any honor for himself. And it's he's a very humble man, you know. Even though he is has got such a reputation, he's humble, he's pleasing, he prospers, he's got leadership. He's pleasing to all people and Saul's servants, it says. And as a result of this, when he starts to get very popular, and the women sing this when they meet him, and they sing this song. And it says this is the only female thing that comes into it. And it's not a great thing, but they sing this song. Saul has killed his thousands, but David his 10,000s. Now I was reading a commentary, and it said the Hebrew isn't that clear about numbers like that, and they thought it was probably a better translation would be, all the Bibles I've ever read always say thousands and 10,000s, but they think a better translation would be Saul has killed his thousands and David has killed myriads of people, right? And it's not meant to be, they think the women are not trying to compare, saying David's done much more. They're just praising, but Saul takes it that they're praising David for much greater victories than he's got. Now, I don't know any Hebrew, and I'm only telling you what I've read in different translations. And we get the start of the jealousy as a result of this. Now, I didn't know, some people call it envy, some people call it jealousy, and I have to say I'm so ignorant of the English language that I didn't know what the difference between jealousy and envy is, and I won't send you a test to see if you know what the difference is. But what it says is envy is when you want something that someone else has, right? Jealousy is when you're worried that someone is trying to take away from you what you already have. Shall I say those again? Envy is when you want something that somebody else has got, and jealousy is when you're worried that someone is trying to take what you already have. And they give this example, this is a sort of Google type example, where they say, if you see your neighbour's got one more wonderful car, right, you can envy them, and think, oh, I wish I had a car like that, right? That's the envy coming out. But if the neighbour then offers your husband, and it's imagining the first one's a woman, if the offers your husband a lift, you could be jealous because you think she might be on the way to trying to steal your husband. Not very clear, but anyway. They differ between envy and jealousy. And Saul is angry because he says, after these women have sung these songs with their tambourines and their instruments and things, what more can he have but the kingdom? The kingdom is mine, and it's as though David's wanting to take it away. That's what Saul's thinking. So it's the start of jealousy. And the text says that Saul looked on David with suspicion. He thought, he's going to toss me out and that sort of thing. Envy or jealousy, either of them, in the church are spiritual dynamite and can destroy or at least hinder the fellowship. And it's very easy within a Christian fellowship to envy or to hinder. Especially if you think my gifting is invisible to those in authority. I'd like to do this, but they never ask me. Or that's you have to be that you want it. But if you've got something that you think is a gift that would be a benefit to the church, and they never ask you, and they ask others to do this, and you think, why aren't they? And it's almost as though your gifting, though you know you've got the gifting, is invisible to those who make the decisions. And as a result of that, you can get envy or jealousy coming into your heart, which is a terrible thing. You can get envy or jealousy about money and wealth. If some people are comfortably off, they have jobs that bring them a good deal of money and all that sort of thing, and they've got houses and everything seems to go well with them, and you struggle each month, how am I going to pay my bills, that sort of thing. Very easy to let the difference in wealth create envy or jealousy within you. Another one is relationships. Some people have this marvelous gift that they can go up to anybody and talk to anybody. They're comfortable with anybody. People love to talk to them. And when I'm not saying you individually do the same, but I'm talking about the person when the person goes up and finds that it's not easy for them to make friends, and people don't seem to want to come and especially talk to them and share things with them. So relationships can be the cause, I think. Education and intellectual gifting is another thing. You know, some people have had marvelous educations, and because of that, they've got so many gifts. You know, because they've had the privilege of this. I'm so grateful for the education that I had, which was all paid for by the state. But you know, going to the grammar school, going to university. I didn't have to pay anything to go to university. I made a profit out of the grant they gave me. It doesn't happen that way nowadays. Somebody's got wise to it. But it is such a benefit that some people get handed to them and others don't. And when it's in the church, you never want to let that come between you. It's a danger point. Family issues can come. Some people have marriages and are happily married. Some people are single and happily single. Others have had divorces or breakups in family. Their children may not be following the Lord, that they are suffering from all sorts of different ways. And it's very easy to look critically at somebody else, particularly if yours is the wonderful marriage that everyone likes to be with and your children are great. You are the person for whose children don't seem to be great and don't seem to be caring and loving and things like that, and you're on your own, or maybe you've had a breakdown in relationships. You can also get the thing of ageism within the church, and new people coming in full of fresh energy, and then there are others at the age of 87 who struggle to even stand without a decent thing. But ageism can come in. And it's very easy to say, why do they get this? Why do that thing? And if you start to let that come into your fellowship, you're bringing spiritual dynamite that will blow things up. It's very, very important that you don't let these things affect your relationship. Well, it's good if you don't let them affect your relationship in the whole of life, but it's especially good if you don't let it happen to people in your church. Now, the text says that Saul got an evil spirit from God. Now, I struggled with this, and because I didn't think God sent evil spirits, but my text says, as I read it, and I think what it is this, that there are evil spirits all around, and you if you're a Christian and follow God, you have a protective shield over you. It's like these military protective shields, aren't they, that bombs can't come through because they've got some radar or something that stops it. And I see it in this way. And what I think is God withdraws the protective shield over Saul and then the evil. I don't think God says you shall have an evil spirit. I think that if you disobey God enough and depart from him enough, maybe your protective shield gets taken away from you. Now this is just how I view it, because I can't believe that God sends evil spirits. I much more rather think that he allows evil spirits to do their work. It's not that God is creating evil spirits and saying, bang, he's going to have one, or she's going to have one. Saul had opened himself to evil, and I think God had taken his spirit. And it says in the new translations, Saul raved. He was so angry and he raved. And at this thing, David and his music are very helpful, doesn't he? David plays music, and music seems to be able to calm Saul, and David's scared at this. But we hear in the text that Saul hurls his spear. Now, he was a skillful warrior, and David must have dodged to avoid it. And it says he did that twice. So there was real enmity that Saul was seeing David coming to this prominence, and David avoids them on both occasions. And so then Saul appoints him as a commander in the army. Now, it looks marvelous, doesn't it? It looks like a great honouring of David. But behind it, you wonder whether if he's always going out and fighting, he's likely to get killed. You know, if he's going into all the battle scenes, who's going to get killed? Well, maybe. And so I don't think it's a great thing. I think it's an important thing. David learns all the skills of being a wartime leader. But what happened in the end was that Saul dreaded David, but Israel and Judah, it says, loved him. I think it's an amazing story of these three men. The wonderful openness of Jonathan, and his not hanging on to power, is saying to David, you're going to be the king. You're the right man, you're going to be the king. Take my robe, take my armor. And as you read more about Jonathan, which we're not in our passage today, you see there comes a stage where Saul says in a battle, nobody's to eat anything all day. And Jonathan doesn't hear this, and he dips his spear into some honey because he's hungry, and he eats the honey. And then they have a lottery to see who's done it. And Jonathan is going to be killed. Saul says, whoever has eaten will be killed. And all the people gather around and say, no, you can't kill Jonathan. And there's that lovely character of him. Open, honest, not holding on to what he's got, willing to give it away. His robe, his armor, he'll give away out of love. And there's just... when I was 11-year-old at school, we used to have one period per week of divinity. And I think the master, I think he was undoubtedly was a Christian man, but I don't think he found it easy to take a group of noisy, unkempt boys and teach them divinity in one period per week. But I remember, one thing that I remember from all those lessons was he introduced me, or introduced us, to something that the Bible calls the Song of the Bow. I think it's the first chapter of 2 Samuel. And I remember at 11 thinking, this is one of the most beautiful things I have ever read. It really touched me deeply at the age of 11. And it's called the Song of the Bow. And it says, David chanted with lament over Saul and Jonathan his son. They've both just been killed. And he told them to teach sons of Judah the Song of the Bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. And this is the thing. Your beauty, O Israel, is slain on your high places. How have the mighty fallen? Tell it not in Gath. Proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised exult. O mountains of Gilboa, let not dew or rain be on you, nor fields of offerings. For there the shield of the mighty was defiled, the shield of Saul not anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, The bow of Jonathan did not turn back, and the sword of Saul did not return empty. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and pleasant in their life, and in their death they were not parted. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions. O daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you luxuriously in scarlet, who put ornaments of gold on your apparel. How have the mighty fallen in the midst of the battle? Jonathan is slain on your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. You have been very pleasant to me. Your love to me was more wonderful than the love of women. How have the mighty fallen and the weapons of war perished? When you think what Saul tried to do to David all his life, chasing him, seeking whenever he could get him pinned in to kill him, and he can, at the end of it, it's almost like sort of a lament of love for the life of Saul and for the life of Jonathan. As I say, as an 11-year-old boy, I thought it was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever read, and I still think so. So it stood the test of time.
Let your living word abide in me so richly as I abide in you. Let your living